This is Kreskin, and of course you know me as the Amazing Kreskin. With the movie The Great Buck Howard that John Malkovich played me in which he harnessed and dramatized my handshake, it's become a signature now all over the world, that rather violent, traumatic way of shaking hands. That's not necessarily the way I quite shake hands, but he exaggerates by multiples. I thought it would be interesting, and I think you're going to find this quite intriguing, to reflect upon some of the definitions of the handshake. After all, the beginning of it was obviously for a number of reasons. No question has been theorized that in the beginning days, people grabbed both hands to shake, and the reason was to prove that their hands were empty or certainly devoid of an arm and a knife or what have you. Then it came to the point where it became so common that the shaking of a hand became the signature, and the handshake was a seal of a bond or a closeness. My whole childhood is based on this because we all learned, our parents taught us, that you shake someone's hand, you keep their word. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that policy existed today? Simply a handshake was a bond because it never questioned in our minds that we would change our mind or not keep our word. Here's some of the definitions of handshakes. Oh, by the way, Anthony Fauci and some of his followers and associates and so forth during the pandemic and after it suggested that we perhaps should end all shaking of hands. What he didn't consider is how unrealistic that whole thought was, because that would also mean we'd have to end all dancing, all wrestling, and on it would go to avoid transmitting a disease. There's a prominent, by the way, part of my performances that captures the essence of the handshake. At the end of many of my full evening concerts, where I have a group of subjects on stage demonstrating the power of suggestion, I invite them at the end of the performance to go into the audience and just shake hands with someone they don't know. Yes, you have read my mind and know the climax of that. They end up unable to let go of the person, and for the next 4 or 5 minutes, as the audience enjoys their hysteria, they are with the dilemma of not being able to let go of someone. Oh, by the way, I have not ever forgotten, I've not forgotten and overlooked the release of someone that was put through this during my performance. So no one is going along in their life with a bond of friendship that they never wanted to have. Now, that's the prominent demonstration of catalepsy. Let's look at some of the way it's been defined by characters. Al Capone, one of the most notorious gangsters in history, his definition was, you accomplish with a smile, a handshake, and a gun more than you can do with just a smile and a handshake. So you understand, yes, he was very practical and very realistic and knowing in his definition. Ben Franklin, one of the greatest historic figures, one that I idolized as a young man and most of us did as children going to school. The handshake, he said, the handshake of the host affects the taste of the roast. So the handshake of the host affects the taste of the roast. Bob Hope has a classic remark. The old water heater in my dressing room was working, but was kind of tired. It gave as much warmth as an agent's handshake. I find that, I cherish that particular flavor. Johanni Palasman, a Finnish architect. Did I get that right, folks? Did it come across right? But I don't speak Finnish. Her definition was, the door handle is the handshake of the building. Interesting comparison. Clifton Fadiman. Clifton Fadiman was a radio and TV personality of a legendary background and also an American intellect. And his remark was, Experience teaches you that the man who looks you straight in the eye, particularly if he adds a firm handshake, is hiding something. Well, that's the thoughts of Clifton Fadiman, and we'll go on to a gal who's an interesting person. She is a career expert. Her name, Nicole Williams. Don't underestimate the power of the nonverbal. You'd be amazed how many people come in for interviews with poor posture, weak handshakes, and blank stares. Boy, folks, did she not say it all. Erwin Paul Lazar, he's a talent agent and a booker, has said something that I can share with you myself. He says, I have no contracts with my clients. Just a handshake is enough. And most of my agreements in my entire career, and they've been people who bonded with me for years, have been through a handshake, folks. I can tell you that. Mark Scouser, who's an American economist, said, in my lifetime as a younger man, you were assumed to be an honest person, your word was your bond, and a handshake was as good as a contract in business. By the way, folks, my own handshake reveals something about me that's pretty basic. I did not deliberately style my shaking of hands in this way. From my mid-teens on, it became more and more energetic, and it really is expressing that I'm looking forward with energy to the individual I'm communicating with. That's how important my handshake is to me.